Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
The trouble begins. Let's start out by just saying up front, and I'm not a nice guy, and probably explains why I never got married. I tend to have a cruel sense of humor and don't like people much. I will and can be an absolute jerk. My family's land has been around since long before city planners and real estate agents started chopping up the countryside like it was cake. We started with about 2,000 acres, passed down from my great-grandparents, carved up slowly over time for cousins, aunts, and uncles. Now I've got about 100 acres left to my name, still holding the original farmhouse, barns, and my long, wide driveway. That driveway is important. From the highway, it might look like a regular road, but it isn't. It's not county maintained, it's not on any public maps, and it's definitely not up for negotiation. That's my driveway, paved with my family's money, sitting entirely on my land. The other side of the road? That was a different story. Some relatives sold their section to a developer years back. And just like that, our quiet stretch of farmland got a row of McMansions and cookie-cutter homes sprouting up like weeds. You could spot the cheap design from a mile off, maybe 2 home layouts total, sprayed across the subdivision like a rubber stamp. And, of course, where there are overpriced beige boxes, there's an HOA. I should have known it was coming. Still, I didn't expect one quite this ridiculous. At the head of this neighborhood empire was a woman named Karen. I didn't know her name at first, but it didn't take long to figure her out. She was the type who barked orders instead of asking questions, stormed into situations she barely understood, and carried herself like she was queen of the suburbs. Her yard had more signs than plants, and she stood outside with clipboards like it was a full-time job. I didn't live in their neighborhood. Not by a long shot. My house sat well beyond the new development, separated by open fields and trees. But my driveway was the only way in or out. The subdivision used it like it was a public road, and I'd been letting it slide because, until now, they hadn't bothered me. That changed fast. It started with a letter. I pulled it from my mailbox on a Tuesday, thick, overstuffed envelope with HOA branding on the front. Inside were forms, welcome materials, a breakdown of dues, and a list of rules that looked longer than a court summons. Dear property owner, as a resident adjacent to the community, your property is now considered part of our homeowners association per the encroachment review and updated planning survey. I stopped reading, tossed it in the junk drawer, and cracked a beer. A few days later, Karen showed up at my door. I'd just stepped out of the shower, hadn't even gotten dressed yet. Answered the door in my underwear with a towel slung over my shoulder and a cup of coffee steaming in my hand. I'm Karen, she announced like it should mean something to me. President of the HOA. We haven't received your signed documents. Cool, I said, sipping my coffee. You were supposed to submit them last week. No thanks. She blinked, looking around like she expected someone to back her up. You're required to be part of the HOA. It's not optional. You on my land? I asked, squinting at her. She hesitated. The road is shared access. No, it's not. It's mine. Been in my family for nearly 100 years. Goodbye. I shut the door in her face. From there, it escalated. Every week, another letter arrived. Violations, fines, threats of legal action. Stuff about unapproved paint colors, improper fencing, wild vegetation, outbuildings. They cited every made-up rule in their book, and every letter went straight into the drawer with the rest. Karen came back a few times. Each visit was more heated than the last. I took great pleasure in being as unpleasant as possible. Sometimes I'd blast music when I saw her walking up the driveway. Once, I answered the door holding a live chicken. Another time, I pretended to be asleep on the porch with a fake snake curled around my neck. You're being childish, she said once, arms crossed tight. No, I replied. You're trespassing. She stormed off, muttering something about legal repercussions. I told my family about it. They'd dealt with HOA nonsense before, but this was something else. I called up my lawyer just to be safe, asked him to confirm what I already knew. They had no claim to my land. Not even close, he said. You're not on their plat. You're not under their rules. They can't touch you. Just keep documentation. Save every letter. So I did. I had a file cabinet filling fast. But Karen wasn't backing down. Her obsession with controlling everything spread like a rash. She tried getting the county involved. Code enforcement came knocking. Health inspectors, zoning officers, even a guy from the water district showed up one morning. Each one left empty-handed. But it didn't stop. Then came the surprise. One afternoon, I pulled a letter from the mailbox and nearly laughed out loud. Notice of lien intent. They were threatening to put a lien on my property for unpaid dues and fines, none of which were legal. That's when I knew I had to get serious. The line had been crossed. Karen wasn't just being annoying. She was trying to sink her claws into land she had no business touching. It wasn't about neighborly disputes anymore. This was about control, and she wasn't going to stop unless I made her. I started planning, watching, gathering. Karen wanted war? Fine. She was going to get one. After the lien threat, I stopped playing defense. I wasn't going to wait around for Karen to come up with another letter or summon another inspector. If she wanted a power struggle, I was going to show her what losing control really looked like. The first step was reclaiming my land in a way that could not be ignored. I made signs, big ones, with reflective paint and bold block letters. Private property, no trespassing, driveway use by permission only. I planted them every 50 feet along the stretch of road between the highway and where the subdivision began. I even added little motion sensor lights so they lit up at night. Karen was not pleased. She came marching up again, this time dragging some poor guy from the HOA board with her. Middle-aged, flustered, sweating through his polo shirt. I decided to name him Bob. Bob opened his mouth to speak, but Karen bulldozed right past him. "You're trying to intimidate residents," she snapped, jabbing a finger toward the signs. "You're creating an atmosphere of hostility. This is unacceptable." I leaned on my porch railing. "Still on my land. You didn't ask permission to come up here. Technically, you're trespassing." Again, Bob stepped forward, trying to defuse things. "Look, maybe we could just talk about this." "No need to escalate," I cut him off. "Oh, I'm not escalating. I'm just clarifying things. See, the part you're standing on? My driveway. Those signs? They're legal." I checked. "If you want to use this road, you're going to have to pay for the privilege." Karen's face turned red. "This is outrageous. You can't block public access to private homes." "There's nothing public about this," I said. "It's all private. You just assumed otherwise." She turned to Bob. "Do something." He looked at me, then at the signs, then back at Karen. Maybe we should talk to legal." She spun on her heel and stomped back to her SUV. That night, I cracked open a cold beer, sat on the porch, and started brainstorming. From that point on, I made it my mission to give Karen something to report every single day. I painted my fence in bold, bright stripes, red, yellow, green, and blue, just for fun. Not the whole thing, mind you, just the part visible from the edge of the subdivision. I installed outdoor speakers near the tree line and started playing music during the day, just under the legal decibel limit. Classic rock, polka, Viking war chants, whatever I was in the mood for. Karen filed noise complaints. The sheriff's office sent someone out twice, and both times they left shrugging. "It's not illegal," one deputy said, almost apologetically. "We'll make a note." Then came the barbecue. I knew she was vegan, which made it even more satisfying. I fired up the grill 3 times a week and made sure the wind carried the scent of smoked brisket, ribs, and sausages across the fields. Karen nearly choked on fury. "Open flame," she shouted one afternoon from the other side of the fence. "We'll report it to the fire department." "Already did," I yelled back. They said it was fine. I invited them to the next cookout. "You want a plate?" She stormed off again. Bob trailed behind, visibly uncomfortable. Soon after, I installed a chicken coop. Not a small one either, big enough for a dozen hens and a couple of mean-looking roosters. I built it in full view of her kitchen window. Roosters crow at sunrise, and mine didn't miss a beat. Karen started sending city inspectors and zoning enforcement officers daily. She filed noise, sanitation, and code complaints. But nothing stuck. I had all my permits. I kept everything clean, documented, and legal. The officers started recognizing me. One of them, a guy named Jeremy, laughed as he checked the chicken coop. "You got enemies in that HOA?" "Huh? Something like that," I said. Karen didn't stop there. She called the Environmental Protection Agency to complain about runoff, the county health department, the Department of Agriculture. She even got the state wildlife division involved after spotting a raccoon near my compost bin. Every time, the authorities came, looked around, and left. Some of them rolled their eyes. A few chuckled. One even apologized. Meanwhile, I kept escalating. I installed a series of wind chimes. Dozens of them, all tuned to different keys. They made eerie, beautiful, chaotic sounds whenever the wind picked up. I strung them through the trees closest to her property line. Karen recorded videos and sent them to the HOA board, demanding immediate action. Bob started avoiding me altogether. Eventually, I caught her standing just inside the edge of my land, filming with her phone. You're trespassing again, I said from behind her. She jumped. I have a right to document disturbances. Cool, I said. Smile for the security cameras. She spun and walked off without a word. I reviewed the footage later. Every time she stepped an inch over the property line, I added it to a folder labeled Evidence. Karen. The HOA tried to issue more fines. I sent each envelope back unopened with a post-it note that read, "Return to sender, not a member." Karen finally stopped coming up herself. Instead, she sent others. I made it my goal to make each interaction more uncomfortable than the last. One guy showed up asking to take photos for a compliance review. Sure, I said. Let me just pose by the co-op. Want the hens in it too? They stopped sending people after a while. That's when Karen made her next move. I got a letter, not from the HOA this time, but from their attorney. Inside was a printed copy of a lawsuit. They were trying to sue me for road obstruction, environmental violations, and emotional distress. They were still pretending my driveway was a public road and that I owed them access. I handed the whole mess off to my lawyer. Get comfy, he said. This one's going to be fun. Karen had no clue what she was walking into. I didn't even flinch when I got the official summons. Karen was serious, or at least she thought she was. The HOA had scraped together some money from their dues. No doubt sold it to the residents as a neighborhood protection legal fund, and they were coming after me in court. The claim was laughable. They argued that the road, my driveway, had become a de facto public access point. That since the developer built the homes alongside it, the residents had grown accustomed to its use. They threw in complaints about the chickens, the music, the signs, the barbecue smoke, the painted fence, anything they could twist into malicious intent to harm the peaceful enjoyment of the community. My lawyer took one look at the complaint and burst out laughing. They really think they can turn your private driveway into a public utility because they're used to it, he said. Do they think squatters' rights apply to roads now? I didn't even ask what our next move was. I just told him to tear them to shreds. While that slow legal monster started moving in the background, I got back to what I did best, bothering Karen. The next Saturday morning, I rented a bounce house. No kids, no party. I just set it up near the tree line, climbed in with a book and a drink, and spent the morning gently bobbing up and down while reading and sipping bourbon. Every few minutes, I waved toward her kitchen window. By Sunday, a handmade, "No loitering" sign had been taped to the HOA community board at the entrance of the subdivision. I took it down, laminated it, and hung it in my chicken coop. On Monday, someone, I had my suspicions, left a pile of rotten fruit just inside my fence line. I reviewed the camera footage, and sure enough, Karen's husband was the delivery guy. I sent a copy to the sheriff and posted the screenshots on a Facebook page I made just for updates about the war with the HOA. Fruit of the poison tree, I captioned it. The page gained followers fast. Turns out a lot of the HOA residents weren't fans of Karen either. Anonymous messages started pouring in. Screenshots of her rants in private group chats, her emails to board members, and, most hilariously, audio of her screaming during board meetings. My personal favorite was one where she yelled, "He is a land tyrant, a menace," and someone near the microphone snorted and said, "You picked this fight." I knew then that cracks were forming in her precious little empire. The court date finally came, and I showed up in jeans and a t-shirt that said, "Still not an HOA member." Karen and the board had suited up like they were marching into the Supreme Court. She had binders. Bob had sweat stains already forming on his button-down. A few other board members looked like they hadn't slept in days. The judge opened with a deadpan. Let me be clear, this case hinges on one question. Is the road in question on the defendant's private property? My lawyer passed him the county land survey records, parcel numbers, easement maps, even the original family plat from decades ago, when my great-grandparents first claimed the land. The judge read through it in silence. He glanced over the top of his glasses at Karen. You are aware this isn't a public road, correct? Karen launched into a breathless rant about implied use, resident expectations, historical access, and some nonsense about community cohesion. The judge held up a hand. You don't own the road. You don't have an easement. You never negotiated access. Your whole community is technically trespassing. Karen blinked. The judge leaned back in his chair. Dismissed. She stood there, mouth open. Bob whispered something, probably begging her to sit down. but she didn't move. I walked out with the biggest smile I've had in years. That afternoon, I changed the code on the gate. By that evening, traffic backed up along the highway shoulder as HOA residents tried to figure out how to get to their own homes. Karen had promised them it would never come to this. She swore they'd win, and now they were stuck. Literally, Bob showed up first. He pressed the gate intercom. "Look, can we talk?" I let the silence drag out for a full minute before answering. "About what?" He rubbed his face. "Access. Look, this has gotten out of hand. People can't get to their houses. We'll back off if you let us through." I sipped my drink. "Back off permanently?" He hesitated. "Let me talk to the board." Karen showed up 2 hours later. She didn't press the intercom. She banged on the gate itself. "Open this gate," she shouted. "You can't do this." I pressed the speaker button. "Dismissed. Remember? You're a disgrace to this neighborhood. A criminal." "You're still trespassing," I said. The next morning, I watched from my porch as residents parked along the highway and trudged through the ditch to get to their homes. It was like a suburban Oregon Trail. Minivans, heels in mud, angry kids, leashed dogs yanking their owners into thickets. Then the rumors started. Someone posted in a local Facebook group that Karen had spent over $15,000 of HOA money on the lawsuit. Someone else said she forged a letter pretending to have an easement agreement. Another claimed Bob was trying to convince the rest of the board to resign before things got worse. And oh, they got worse. I held a yard sale. Not to sell anything, just to put weird things on tables and see who came by. I put out traffic cones, old CRT monitors, a taxidermy raccoon wearing sunglasses, and a stack of Property Rights 101 books. Karen showed up, of course. She walked straight to the table and knocked over the raccoon. "You think this is funny?" she hissed. "I think you take yourself way too seriously. People are trapped." "No, they're just taking the scenic route." She stepped closer. "You'll regret this." "I doubt it." Bob tried again, this time with a letter. It was reasonable, almost too reasonable. Said they'd stop all enforcement, remove my name from any databases, issue a formal apology, and agree to pay a nominal monthly fee for road access if I just unlocked the gate. I had to admit, he was trying. I told him I'd think about it. Then I built a second, smaller gate about 50 yards down the road, just in case. Nothing fancy, just enough to make sure that if Karen tried any tricks, I had options. Karen, of course, didn't let it go. She started a campaign to get signatures from the other homeowners to eminent domain the road. I laughed so hard I dropped my phone. She tried getting the county involved, but my lawyer was already a step ahead. We'd submitted our own paperwork, documenting the harassment, the false claims, and even the trespassing. He said we could go on the offensive if I wanted to. I wasn't done yet. I converted part of my barn into a tiny community theater. I built a stage, put up string lights, and got a small PA system. Opening night, a live reading of HOA bylaws, hosted by me, dressed as Napoleon. Invites were sent anonymously to every resident. Over a dozen showed up. Even Bob came. Karen didn't. It ended with me holding up a scroll and reading, and thus the great tyranny fell, defeated by the one thing it could not regulate, private property. Some people clapped, a few laughed, and at least 3 of them asked for the gate code on their way out. Bob returned later that week, this time alone. "She's going to implode," he said. "Then step back and let her," I replied. "But the board is just her, and you know it." He nodded. What if we voted her out?" Now we were talking. Word got around fast after the court ruling. And not the version Karen wanted, either. The judge had shut them down so hard, it echoed. It wasn't just a legal loss. It was public humiliation. Residents had to hear it from the source. Their queen bee had gambled thousands of their dollars on a lawsuit she couldn't possibly win. And now, thanks to her, the main road in and out of their homes was locked behind a keypad they didn't have the code to. The subdivision went into panic mode. Karen scrambled to control the narrative. She posted long, rambling messages on the HOA's message board about unforeseen setbacks, technical misunderstandings, and ongoing negotiations with a hostile neighbor. She tried to spin it like she was still in charge, like this was just a temporary inconvenience. Nobody was buying it. Then came the emergency board meeting. They held it in a cul-de-sac with folding chairs and passive-aggressive donuts. Bob stood up, cleared his throat, and tried to read a prepared statement thanking Karen for her service. Halfway through, someone in the back yelled, "She got us all sued." Bob, and it turned into a shouting match. That's when residents started defecting. A few brave souls knocked on my gate one afternoon, hat in hand. A guy named Marvin, a retired engineer, spoke first. "Look, we were never on board with all this," he said. "We just wanted the road to stay open. We're not trying to start a war." I leaned against the gate. "You gonna vote her out?" He looked around, then nodded. "We're close, real close." I gave them all lemonade and sent them back with a little hope and a clear message. Karen was done, whether she knew it yet or not. Over the next few weeks, the HOA unraveled like a cheap sweater in a wind tunnel. First, the treasurer resigned, citing stress and personal conflicts. Then 2 board members quit in a group email that mysteriously leaked to everyone, complete with lines like, "This is not what we signed up for," and "Karen refuses to listen to legal advice." Bob tried to hold the line. Poor Bob. He started showing up looking like a hostage, sleepless, sweaty, barely holding it together. He even tried to meet with me again, asking for a temporary access agreement until they could restructure. I said I'd consider it if the HOA formally admitted in writing that the road was private, I was not a member, and Karen was acting without consent. He didn't come back after that. Then Karen snapped. She called an emergency vote, but nobody showed up except her and one other old-timer who didn't even know what day it was. She posted the results on the message board anyway. Karen re-elected unanimously. That was the final straw. Someone printed a copy of that notice and taped it to every mailbox with a new message scribbled underneath in red Sharpie. "How's that working out for you?" By then, the Facebook group I'd made was 10 times more active than anything the HOA had ever done. Residents started trading tips about bylaws, filing complaints, documenting overreach. It became clear that Karen wasn't just disliked, she was despised. And then, finally, came the vote to dissolve the HOA. It wasn't even close. Bob cast the deciding vote with a heavy sigh and a muttered, "God help us all." Karen didn't speak. She didn't yell. She just left the meeting and drove off. Some say she moved a month later. Others think she's still around, stewing in silence, plotting something no one will care about. But by that point, it didn't matter. The HOA was dead. Not reformed. Not improved. Dead. I changed the code on the gate one last time. Not to keep people out, just to remind myself it was finally over. I sent out a wide email stating that any homeowner could do an access agreement for $50 a year except for Karen. She had to pay $1,000 a week. I took the money. Karen never paid, and threw a massive barbecue party for me and my neighbors. That stretch of road was quiet now, peaceful, except for the chickens. They still crowed every morning, and I made sure every single one of them was named Karen. This is exactly why HOAs should be optional or straight-up banned in rural areas. You don't move next to a guy who owns 100 acres of ancestral land and then try to tell him what to do with it. That's not enforcing standards. That's begging for a disaster. Karen brought that chaos on herself. She had no legal standing, no control, and apparently no common sense. What did she think was going to happen when she went after the one person who actually owned the land everyone depended on? You picked a fight with the landlord of your entire street. Genius. And instead of negotiating like a normal human, she escalated to lawsuits and harassment. I love how OP just kept stacking legal chickens, wind chimes, and smoke like a video game boss unlocking new powers. She tried every weapon in her little HOA arsenal and none of it stuck. Because there was nothing to stick. She was trespassing, overreaching, and finally, she torpedoed her own position so hard that even her loyal minions bailed on her. That's poetic. If anything, OP was too nice. If I were in his shoes, I'd have rented the land to a paintball club or something equally obnoxious. HOAs always think they're the main character until someone hits back harder. Karen thought she was queen of the neighborhood. Turns out she was just a screaming speed bump on someone else's driveway. I don't even live in an HOA, but this gave me flashbacks to my ex's neighborhood. You could get a notice for leaving your trash bins out for 2 hours too long. Total madness. What blows my mind is how confidently Karen operated with zero understanding of land ownership, legal access, or basic civics. She thought existing near someone meant I owned their road now, and dragging poor Bob into every confrontation. You know, that man aged 10 years from stress. I respect the hell out of OP for documenting everything. The signs, the footage, the folder labeled evidence, Karen. That's legendary prep work. Honestly, I hope that footage ends up in a courtroom drama someday. Or a Netflix series. The part that really stuck with me, though, was how fast the rest of the HOA folded when it started costing them comfort. Once people had to park on the highway, suddenly Karen wasn't so heroic anymore. Funny how that works? What I love about this is how every move Karen made things worse for her. Like, she just kept doubling down on bad ideas. You'd think after the first 10 complaints got laughed out of every agency office, she might pause. Nope, she actually escalated to state wildlife officials over a raccoon. A raccoon? Lady, those things live everywhere. Meanwhile, OP's just documenting it all like a Bond villain waiting for the finale. And let's talk about the gate. That moment was so satisfying. Years of assumed control just evaporated when the gate clicked shut and the cops shrugged. Civil matter? Guess you better learn what civil actually means. But the best part was the dissolution of the HOA. Nobody gave a speech. Nobody learned a valuable lesson. They just quit, tail between their legs. Karen didn't lose with dignity. She melted down in real time, tried to crown herself president again, and then disappeared like a bad sitcom character who got written off. I bet her name's still banned from potlucks. This story isn't just revenge. It's a manual on how to dismantle petty tyranny with legal paperwork, roosters, and barbecue.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.